If you're new here, my name is Francois. We talk about audio, video, streaming, all kinds of different technology on this channel. Today, we're going to be looking at the advanced audio filters for your microphone. We're going to be diving deep in on that. Obviously, the goal with this video is to help you understand how to use filters on your microphone. Not only just use filters, but set them up correctly for yourself so that you can sound like a professional live streamer. One of the biggest reasons people will click off of a live stream is because of the audio. People can look past the video quality and people will understand if you can't afford a high quality camera. However, if your audio sounds terrible, it has a lot of background noise, a lot of hissing, a lot of humming, that sort of thing, that is the quickest way to get someone to leave your channel and never come back. So it's very important that you understand how to set up your microphone correctly so you can retain those members when they choose to watch your channel. This video will specifically be talking about the filters on your mic. We won't be talking about mixing your audio. If you're interested in learning how to separate your audio in OBS so that you have control for every single audio source, like your video game, your music, your browser, that sort of thing, you can watch the video on the screen here or use the link in the description below to learn how to set up Voicemeeter Banana. At the end of that video, I show you how to set it up with OBS. So it's definitely worth a watch. Definitely go check that out. There are several different ways you can get audio filters for your microphone. You can get a VST plugin, which is virtual studio technology that works directly in OBS. That's exactly what we're going to do, because with a VST plugin, we can get all of the filters we need within that VST plugin set. The set we're going to be using is the Reaper plugins. We've used them in every single video with equalizer, APO, and stuff. And the reason is because it has literally everything you need. A compression filter, a noise gate filter, it has expanders, limiters, it has all kinds of vocal changing effects and stuff like that. But we're going to be focusing on, you know, the noise gate filter, the EQ, the compression, and that stuff that's really going to enhance the sound of your microphone. So to continue with this video, you'll need to make sure you grab those Reaper plugins, which are in the description below. The Reaper plugins are the actual plugins. You want the RIA plugs. You don't want to download the Reaper software. You want to download the Reaper plugins from that website. Once you have those downloaded, it should install to your VST plugin folder or create a VST plugin folder. Just make sure it downloads into that VST plugin folder within your program files so that OBS can find them so that we can use them. And since this video is talking about high quality streaming, I want to introduce the sponsor of this video, No Ping. In just a few clicks, No Ping makes it so you have the most optimized server route for your video games. With a single subscription, you can lower the amount of ping you have for up to 800 games. If you want to reduce the amount of ping you have, check out No Ping using the link in the description below. You might be wondering why all of a sudden I'm very quiet. I actually shut off all the filters that I have set up in equalizer, APO. So I have none of these active on my microphone right now, so my mic is actually really quiet and it probably sounds not as good. At least we can hope so, right? Then, you know, it would mean that I know what I'm doing and when you're watching this video with a purpose. So if I sound worse right now, that's a good thing because we're going to make myself sound better. So the first thing we need to do in OBS is go and locate our microphone. The microphone is right here. We're going to click on the settings wheel and we're going to go to filters. From here, we're going to set up a new filter. We're going to hit the plus button. We're going to go down to VST and we're going to name this noise gate. The first plugin we always set up is a noise gate filter, and the reason that is because we want to make sure that we're cutting off background noise first from our microphone. Before the processing of other filters get applied, we want to make sure there's no noise that's not necessary on the mic. I do want to note that if the noise is too loud in the background, you won't be able to cut it off with a noise gate filter because the floor volume of your voice is lower than the volume of the background noise. We're going to hit the drop down here. We're going to scroll down till we find the RIA gate. This is our noise gate filter. And we're going to go ahead and open this plugin interface. There are essentially 4 main parameters to this plugin. I know it looks a little confusing when you see all the sliders on this plugin, but I'm going to simplify it for you. On the left, we have the threshold. It's already set for me. The threshold is where we set where the noise gate kind of activates on our audio. We'll talk more about that just in a second. The attack and release sliders are the next most important sliders on this list here. The attack time is going to set how quickly that noise gate opens and lets audio through. The release time is the opposite of the attack time. It is how quickly that noise gate is going to close when audio drops below the threshold that we set. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then last but not least, we have the wet slider in the output mix. This is going to be our gain dial. This is essentially a way for us to apply an increase to the volume after we have applied the noise gate filter to our mic. Our goal here is to block out any unnecessary background noise from reaching the output mix on our stream. The way we can do that is by blocking out any static noise or any unnecessary noise that's popping up when we are not talking into our microphone. So if I stop talking and we take a look at that threshold meter, you'll notice that green audio going up and down when I'm not speaking. What we need to do is slide that threshold slider just above that green audio so that it does not creep through on our microphone. You'll want to make sure that you're listening to that audio, because when you slide it up, it might not be high enough because some of that audio will seep through still when you're speaking. So you want to make sure that you slide it up just a little bit more than where that audio is sitting at. If I were to place it right here at negative 52.5 decibels, you should still hear just a little bit of static when I speak, but when I'm silent, that static is almost non-existent. So what I'm going to do is listen to it and make sure that I'm cutting off all of that unnecessary static. I set mine around negative 48.7 decibels, and that captures pretty much all of that hiss and, annoying noises that I just don't want in my mix at all. The next slider we're going to look at is the attack slider. So when I speak into my microphone and you notice this audio jump up over our threshold, the attack time is essentially setting how quickly that audio is going to be allowed through the threshold and into the output mix. Currently it's set to 3 milliseconds, which is almost not noticeable to the ear. So it's pretty much automatic. When I speak and the audio exceeds that threshold level, it's going to let the audio through right away. If you want to, you can toy with this setting. If you increase this setting, it will kind of fade the audio in, and it'll be a gradual increase of audio instead of all the audio hitting you at once. This is kind of what it sounds like. We're going to go ahead and test this. As we increase this, you'll notice that it's kind of like decreasing the volume of my mic a little bit. It's like a little more quiet. And then with the attack at 3 milliseconds again, it sounds like it did before. I'm going to go ahead and leave my attack time at 3 milliseconds, but if you do increase it, I suggest you keep it below 100 milliseconds. If we move on to the release slider, the release time is basically saying how quickly that noise gate is going to close after the audio drops below the threshold. So as we stop talking and that audio goes back down, how quickly that audio is going to get cut off. It's currently set to 100 milliseconds, which is actually pretty good. I do suggest anywhere from 100 to 120 milliseconds, but this is audio and it is to user taste, so you can set it however you want it to. There are no real objective rules because it is your stream and you can make it how you want to sound. But the general gauge is right in that 100 millisecond range. You don't want it to just kind of fall off automatically. It's nice to have just a slight, fade out so that it's not like, it doesn't sound weird or harsh. It's nice and smooth and it feels good. Last but not least, we're going to look at the wet slider in the output mix. The wet slider, as I said before, is how we can add some volume increase or gain to our mix on the output after we have made adjustments within the filter. So the noise gate will be applied, and then after the noise gate's applied, it will apply the wet slider, which is going to be the gain filter, the amount of audio that we want to add to it. So as you can tell, my microphone is a whole lot louder now than it was before. Actually, you might not be able to tell because I'll be doing some editing magic to make sure the audio is all balanced, but it was quieter before and now it's louder, and you can see that on this meter here. Anyways, that's the wet slider. I do suggest that you apply a gain filter after we do the EQ and compression. The reason that is so we can get all the adjustments to our audio made before we increase the volume on our microphone. So we have our EQ done, which is going to really increase the fullness of our voice, make us sound really nice and clean. Our compression done, which is going to bring us to the front of the audio mix, which is going to make us feel powerful and strong in the audio. And then we increase the gain to our liking, so we're loud enough to be heard, because honestly it's very quiet without that. So I'm going to set the wet dial back down to 0, and I'm going to close out of the noise gate because we have it set up. The next filter we're going to set up is an EQ. What I like to do is set up my de-esser and any reductions to the vocal track before I apply compression. So that means we're going to really, try and reduce that S sound and really any unnecessary sounds of the mix before we put it into a compressor and, do our compressing. Let's go ahead and set up an EQ. We're going to hit the plus button again, go over to VST. We can name this EQ. If you want to go a step further, you can put reductions. Now keep in mind, guys, you don't have to set them up in this order if you don't want to. If you just want to have your reductions, in the same EQ as your normal EQ after compression, you can do that. There is no real objective way of doing this. This is just something that I like to do that I think is a smart move to reduce the S's and the harsher noises of your vocals before you apply compression and gain in the mix. We're going to scroll down until we find the RIA EQ, and we're going to go ahead and open that. You'll notice a digital audio feed playing as you speak. That is your actual audio on your mic. The lighter yellow one is the audio before the EQ, and the brighter yellow one is the audio after the EQ. So in this one, we can go ahead and remove everything but 2 bands. We're going to be focusing on just 2 areas here. The first area we're going to focus on is the S's. If you really want to get your S's as accurate as possible, what you could do is just have 1 band and set the band type to band pass. That will just allow you to monitor the audio right where the harshest of that sound is. So you can say a lot of words that have that S sound and monitor it using that band pass, and then select where you want to set the notch or the cutout for that specific audio area. So what we're going to do now is set the band type to notch, and I'm going to set this slider right around 7,000 hertz. That's where the majority or the bulk of that audio was. I'm going to set it right around 5,500 hertz. It's going to be different for you, but this is where the bulk of that audio was for me. And we're going to adjust the bandwidth just a hair. Now, you don't want to damage your vocals too much, but you want to make sure that you're getting the bulk of that sound for those S's. And with our second band, we're going to remove some of those unnecessary sounds on the very low frequency. So we're going to just put this right around, 50 hertz or so, and we can set this to a high pass. You want to actually look at this meter here. What we're trying to do is eliminate some of that sound that we don't need in the track, but we don't want to damage anything that's, above 80 hertz or so. So if this here gets too low and we're cutting off those 80 hertz, there is some valuable audio information in the 80 hertz range. So just getting that, lower end that we don't need below 80 hertz is kind of the goal here. So this looks pretty good for me. That's enough reductions, I think. I added another notch after I was listening back. I just cut off, those 2 major areas where my S's are just super strong at 5,500 and around 9,000 hertz for me is where that S sound is the harshest. I also want to note here that if you guys have a high room resonance or room mode in your microphone, where you're speaking and there's an echo in a certain frequency that is bouncing back into the microphone and creating just kind of an annoying sound, you can actually kind of notch those specific areas in your mix to help reduce those room resonances. And there's a link in the description below that will help you calculate where those room modes are, so that you can kind of improve that based on the frequencies that are the harshest. So if you're interested, you can use that link in the below and add a few more notches or decreases in those specific areas to kind of help reduce those resonances that are coming through the mic. I don't have any, really loud or harsh resonances, so it's kind of hard to show you exactly what I'm talking about. But if you do have that, make sure you use that resource. Now we're ready to set up a compression filter for our mic. So we're going to hit the plus again. We're going to go to VST. We're going to go ahead and name this compression. We're going to scroll down until we find the RIA comp. Go ahead and open that plugin. There's quite a lot that goes into compression, and compression is the one filter that pretty much everyone gets confused with. I'll do my best explaining how to set it up for yourself, some of the theories that are out there that you can kind of ignore. And, hopefully we can get to a place where you actually understand how compression works and why it's used for your vocal mix. So let's first start with talking about, the main parameters on this plugin. On the left here, like the noise gate filter, we have the threshold. This is where we're going to set when the compression parameters are going to be applied to the audio signal. Similar to the noise gate, the attack and release times are going to be very important parts of compression. The attack time, just like noise gate, is going to set how long it takes for the compression to be applied to the audio signal. The release time is going to be how long before the compression lets go of that audio signal or stops compressing the audio signal after the audio drops below the threshold. You have the ratio, which I'm going to have to talk about a little bit later because it's a more complicated parameter for this filter, and you'll understand why we talk about it later after we get to that point. And then you have your output mix for the wet and dry sliders over here. When setting up compression, you're going to want to make sure you're monitoring your audio. It really helps when setting up compression. There's only one time where we're going to be really paying attention to the meters on the actual screen when it comes to compression. The rest of the time, we're going to be listening and paying attention to how it sounds, and that's how we're going to set compression. A lot of people will tell you that you should set a ratio to this and you should set your attack and release time to these numbers. That is not actually true. You can have an audio signal that requires a higher ratio at a lower threshold, or something similar, or a mix or a variety. Or if you're looking for a different kind of sound, you might require a different set of parameters. So understanding how they work is important, and understanding how to set them up for you is important. So don't just go set numbers that people tell you to. Like you frequently hear set a ratio of 4:1 because that's what you do for vocals. That's not true. It's just not true. First, we're going to take a look at the threshold slider. We're going to get that threshold slider set to where we're ready to set up the rest of the parameters. So first thing we need to do is set our ratio to 2:1. This will help us when setting the threshold, so that's why we got to do that. Otherwise, no compression will be applied, and we'll just be moving that threshold slider up and down pointlessly for no reason. So we need to have at least a 2:1 or something higher than 1 to be able to see the compression applied. And now what we can do is watch the meter as we slide that threshold down. We want to watch the meter compress that audio. We want to see that audio get dropped down just a little bit, almost like a noise reduction or gain reduction to our vocals. Once we start to hear or recognize that audio dropping, that's where we're going to set our threshold for now. So go ahead and drop that threshold slider down, keeping your eye on this meter over here on the right. And once you see that audio starting to get compressed, we want to drop it a little bit below. Right around there looks pretty good, right at -41.8 or -42 decibels for me. Right around there is where I want to have it. After we have the compression applied, we need to make sure we increase the audio to match the same volume as the output before. So we want to apply just a slight gain here to our wet. You can just go based on the average number that is being displayed here. I'm seeing a lot of -4 when I'm speaking. So it looks like a -4 or so, -4.4 or so. So I want to increase the volume by 4 decibels to match the same audio level. What you can do is bypass this plugin by turning it on and off and listen to whether or not there's a change in the level of the audio or how loud that audio is. So that's one way to do this as well, but you want to make sure you're applying enough gain afterwards to make up for the compression that you just applied. After we got that set up, now I can kind of explain what the ratio is doing, so you can set a ratio that you want yourself, and then obviously how the attack and the release time plays into this. So the ratio, and this is what people get confused a lot with compression, is going to reduce the audio. Some people explain it as an increase in lower volumes and a decrease in higher volumes, which is very much accurate, but you need to be aware that it is actually lowering the volume of the entire mix. What it's going to do is for every single decibel that exceeds the threshold that we set, so our threshold set to -41.8 decibels, for every decibel that exceeds that, it will bring it back down to 1 decibel. So if we have a ratio of 2 to 1, for every 2 decibels that exceeds the threshold, it'll drop it down to 1 decibel, essentially cutting that audio in half. Same thing applies for a 3 to 1. For every 3 decibels that exceed, it'll drop that down to 1. For every 4 that exceed, it'll drop it down to 1, depending on the ratio that you have. So when you're adjusting your ratio for yourself, you'll notice that as you increase the ratio, more compression is being applied, or more reduction to that audio signal is being applied. A 2 to 1 ratio is considered a very gentle ratio, whereas a 30 to 1 is pretty much considered a limiter because it'll just cut that audio signal off right where that threshold is set. The attack time is how quickly the compression is applied to the signal. I like to have a longer attack time because you get that initial punch from the original audio. If I increase this and I listen, I just want it to kind of ease into the mix. I want the compression to ease in. I want my transients and my good sounds of my voice to really hit you, and then the compression to slowly apply itself as we go. I think that it sounds best right around 100 decibels. The release time is the opposite of the attack time. It's going to set how much time it takes for the compression to let go of that audio signal. A good rule of thumb is to try and let the audio reset in between sentences or in between words. So what I mean is, like, when I take pauses, my natural pauses in my voice between sentences, I want to make sure that the compression is completely let go of, meaning there's no more compression being applied to the signal. You can do this by watching the meter, but it's better to just kind of listen to it. You can slide this up and down, and as you notice, as I slide it higher up, it kind of lingers. That compression is lingering on the audio. If I drop it down lower, it kind of drops away pretty immediately. I want to set it to where it is resetting in between my words and in between my sentences as best as possible. So I'm going to listen to it as I'm going here and make sure I have it set up in such a way where it does recover between words. I think something like this is pretty good, somewhere around 200 or so, maybe a little bit lower, but right around here I think sounds really good. As you can tell, that now that I have my attack and release applied, I have a little bit less of gain reduction. What I'm going to do is actually increase my ratio until I am decreasing to the gain that I set earlier. This is just something that I do myself. It's not really something that is advised. It's just a little thing that I do myself. I think right around 4.2 to 1 is what we're looking at for a good ratio for me, and I think that sounds pretty solid. After we've set up our compression, we're ready to move on to the EQ boosts, and this portion is actually the funnest for me. I have no idea why. I just really enjoy it. So we're going to do another EQ here. We're going to just call this EQ. You can name it EQ Boost if you want to, if that makes it easier, but I'm just going to name it EQ. And we're going to scroll down until we find the RIA EQ, just like we did before. Go ahead and open this plugin. There are a few areas we're going to focus on when boosting our audio. We're only going to focus on the major areas here. My EQs can typically get pretty complex. I have some EQs with 13 bands, some EQs with 18 bands, where I'm just making minor adjustments in certain areas to just kind of bring it all together. But you don't need to do all that nonsense. We can keep it simple and still sound very warm, very full, very good. So what we're going to do here with this first band is hunt out our main vocal area. So we're going to bring in some of that warmth. This is going to vary depending on you and your voice, whether you're a male or a female. This is going to vary. What we're hunting for is the main vocals, our main vocals. I have a rather low voice, if you haven't noticed. A majority of my vocal information kind of sits right around that 150 hertz range or so, where some, most people actually are sitting a little bit higher in 170, maybe 180 or so, but mine is actually rather low, right around 130, 140, 150. All we're going to do is just apply a slight gain adjustment, right around 1 decibel, maybe a little bit more. You don't need much more than 1 decibel in this area. And we're going to tighten up that bandwidth just a hair. We want probably a bandwidth around 1, maybe even a little more, maybe 1.6. You could even just keep it at 2 and have that wider, so you kind of touch all of the main vocals there. The next area we're going to talk about is the area where you can get more clarity in your vocals. If you're lacking clarity and you want to increase that range, we're looking from around 600 hertz all the way to 4,000 hertz. In that range there is where you're going to find the clarity in your voice. I have, like I said before, a fairly low voice, but I get a lot of my clarity around 3,000 hertz and 2,000 hertz. And what we can do here is apply, again, just a nice subtle boost. And we can actually make this band rather wide, depending on the sound that you're looking for. Just whatever sounds good to you. What I do typically sometimes too is I will actually make a rather tight band right around 3,000 hertz, and I will boost that bad boy, 2 decibels, 3 decibels. I'll apply a big boost right there. But what we're looking for is just nice subtleties that sound really good. We don't want to make any damages. We want to make the right adjustments for our mix and for our stream. So something that you can do, is make that band rather wide, 2, maybe even 3, depending on the sound. Just listen to it, play with it, find what you like, right? You can even slide this a little bit lower, right around 1250 or so, and just give that nice boost. I did want to mention something that I didn't mention in the EQ reductions portion of this video is another area you can reduce some unwanted sounds. If you have kind of this nasally sound that you're not looking for, or even a muddiness kind of sound, you can really find some unwanted sound sometimes in that 200 to 600 hertz range. So another reduction you can make if you need to is you can place a band in this area here. You'll have to kind of go find it out. I have kind of a muddy voice, so right around that 500 hertz range kind of comes in very thick, and it can be intrusive to that overall signal. And you can kind of just, lower that from the mix a little bit, make it a little bit softer on the ears. So a cut like that can be useful as well, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave that there because it is something that I need to apply to my mix. And then last but not least, what we want to look at is applying just a slight boost at the end in the high signal or the high frequency of the audio. Now, this is not something that has to be done. This is something that you can choose to do. What we're gonna do is actually a high shelf in this area. And what you can do if you want to bring some artistic sound to your vocals is increase this lower frequency range. You could probably start this actually around, 8,000 hertz or so and make it a rather tight band. And, just make a slight increasement to that higher frequency. But if it starts to sound, very harsh on the ear, this is something that I can't do to my audio because it's actually too harsh on the ear. So I really only make my adjustments, in my lows and in my clarity section and a little bit here in the 3K and stuff. And then, sometimes I'll apply just a little band right around there where I'll put a slight increase to just add a little artistic sound to my vocals. But that's another range you can look at as well for your EQ. After we've done the EQ, now we can increase the volume of our microphone. You can actually do it in the EQ section if you want. You can apply the gain filter here. What I'm going to do is just set up a gain filter. So if you hit the plus button and go to gain, and I will name this just volume or something like that. I'm going to move this over so I can see my microphone audio. I'm just going to increase this until my microphone is hitting right around, that negative 10 dB area. So I'm applying essentially a 14 decibel gain to my audio. And that right there completes the entirety of this setup. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you learned something from this video, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more content just like this. If you guys have any questions after watching this video, you can always ask those questions in the description below, in the comment section below. If you have any video ideas for me, or if you're struggling with something specifically, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below as well. My name is Francois, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video where I talk about nerd things that are rather boring. If you made it this far in the video, I want to give you a nice little bro fist.